like if you do manage, depending on your character, if you do manage to figure out how to safely take out the swarm of little buggers, it's like, well, whatever you learned when you come to the Stygian dolls, you're just completely pooched. You're done. Because I have just enough life leech to survive it as a barbarian whirlwinding. Yeah, go whirlwind through a group of the Stygian dolls, you're dead.
Done.
It's game over.
And it's little things like this that are actually the reason why I don't entirely trust the community, like our opinion of what really should be there. And I think because we see it in Act 3, where it's the kind of thing where you first show up and you say, oh, this is awesome. And another place we saw it in a Blizzard game is in World of Warcraft, when the Temple of Anchorage came out, or was going to come out. Because leading up to it, you had people saying, yeah, we want bigger, we want more massive, we want giant, epic, huge spaces. We want these types of experiences. We want to be swarmed with monsters. We want a Diablo environment that isn't just linear.
No,
and then you
I
get
love
it.
me some linear, man.
And then what we see in Act 3 is that, well, linear with a random generator doesn't quite work. What we saw in Temple of Anchorage is it's like, okay, you want big, here, we'll give you a place that's so big it has its own mounts. You need to collect these mounts in order to ride, because otherwise it's going to be just too big. And before that came out, everyone was like, yeah, this is going to be so freaking awesome. I love this idea. And conceptually, it is a neat idea on paper, but after even just the second time of spending 12 minutes running back to the Twin Emperors, that's not 12 minutes to reassemble. That's just the run back before you start buffing. You realize, you know what? Bigger is not necessarily better. And the things that I demanded as a community member, as a player, the things that I said I wanted weren't really that good for me. In the end. They didn't play as well as I thought they would.
Very true.
And so I'm always a little bit wary about, when we're on the forums and people are saying, it's like, yeah, we want this in Diablo 3. I'm like, well, maybe you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I used to think about it back when I played Diablo 2 and the game was new. I used to think, oh gosh, how awesome would it be if this was an MMO, if it had tons of players, it had a huge world and everybody interconnected and blah blah blah. And I think back at those thoughts and I go, what was I thinking? That would have been the worst thing to ever happen to Diablo. And it's very simple why. The actual mechanics that go into it would be completely thrashed the moment it became an MMO. You can't have it all. You can't have 500 million players in a game and no lag. You can't have super epic gameplay and have 50 people in the game. It just doesn't work. Everything in World of Warcraft is essentially toned down to some degree to make up for that fact. In Diablo 2, how many fireballs could you cast in a minute?
I don't know.
Oh, a very large amount.
Somewhere between 60 and about 200. Okay?
I get 400 from me.
Right, exactly.
Ken's got the epic cast rate.
That's right.
If you had a guy in World of Warcraft, how many could you cast in a minute?
Far less.
I don't know. Fireball is a 3.5 second cast. I think it's 3 seconds spec. So that's 20.
Right.
Top. Well, so maybe 21 with a lot of haste.
Right.
Something like that. Yeah.
Maybe 21. And that's a perfect example of just how different the systems are. And it has to be that way because you have that many more people to account for. You can't have everybody shooting off 800 million fireballs at the same time. It just wouldn't work.
But it'd be so fun.
And think about, if you've ever seen it before, in, if you're say you're a fireball spec guy, since we're talking about that, you get into an area, let's say you've set players to 8, but you're not properly geared for it, you're above your grade, and all of a sudden you're firing these fireballs off rapid fire and nothing's dying. It would have to be like that, because in order to account for it, each individual contribution would have to be so much less significant that you would end up feeling completely ineffective against the things you're fighting.
That's true.
And this is and this goes back to the whole ongoing discussion about how many players, should they raise it back up to 8, and why I say no, they shouldn't. Because having it as 4 to 5 enables them to set a difficulty scale where you can still, if you get on your own, you're probably going to want to get back to the group, but you're not screwed.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it. I mean, when you really start to examine it, what it comes down to is same basic principle. Bigger is not always better. More is not always better. Because you cannot balance the game around 800 people. You can't really balance it all that way in a fun way around 12 people or 16 people or any of these other numbers that we think, oh, this might be great. No, it wouldn't. It'd be pretty terrible for the system.
Well, you could, but it would have to be, say, 12 to 16 people and not 1 to 16 people.
Right. But even then you still run into a lot of the same problems, which are, I'm still going to feel like I'm only a small contributing part, not I'm an epic hero that owns hundreds of demons by myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, take a look back on D2. I mean, how many games did you actually go in where it was all 8 people in a game, maxed out, doing the entire quest line? Almost never. It was usually a Diablo run or a Baal run where everyone was all together. And even then, it was like sorceress, teleport, open a town portal so everybody can run in, and then we'll start mopping up.
I recently joined a game actually on my druid where I tried. I'm like, okay, I put out a thing saying, I think Act 2, beginning to end, and we eventually had, I think, 6 people in the group. And it just started to break down so fast because the hallways weren't big enough to accommodate people, so they'd take other branches. And the next thing you know, you've actually got 3 mini groups running around, and you're not working together anymore. It's just, oh, hey, I found it, town portal goes up. But by the time you get there, if you were in one of the groups that was off on the far side of things, by the time you get back to where that group was, they're now another step ahead, and they've broken up again, and so it's just kind of this swarming feeling mass. You're not actually doing the quest together. It's just whoever gets there first fires it off, and you kind of hope that they don't kill it and take the loot before you arrive.
I'm actually really looking forward to, if you go off in Diablo 3 by yourself, you're screwed, and you're gonna get owned so hard from leaving the group. It's gonna be awesome.
But, guys, I have more than 3 friends, and we all want to play together. What are we going to do?
Make 2 groups.
Alright, that's my suggestion. Have multiple games running, or get new friends. Or start discarding friends.
As far as the small contribution, Blizzard already has something to look back to. The original 40-man WoW raids were designed, they actually toned down the whole small contribution mentality from games like EverQuest, where it was worse. But the original design of the 40-man raids was basically more like an orchestra rather than a fight. You had things like, okay, you would have 2 groups of healers, and they would take turns healing, while the other ones would go and they would sit back and just regen mana.
Right.
And if you step back and you look at the overall scope of these fights, how it's going, and like, okay, well, you've got this tank, and this tank goes in, and they're holding it, and then another one switches, and the healers are stepping in and out. And if you get that big picture view, it's really cool, and it's really neat. But if you're that healer in group 2 who's like, okay, so for the first 3 minutes of the fight, I do nothing. And then I step in and I heal once the A group is getting low. And then once they're back up, I back out. And maybe it'll be my turn again. And so it's like, well, on an individual level, most people aren't very good at thinking in orchestral terms. And they're not good at stepping back at the end of the fight and saying, wow, look at that. We had this group over here doing that, all of this stuff. They want to be a lot more central.
Right.
I used to hate those people so much when I used to play WoW.
And so if you're in a far more organic group of like 4 to 5 people, you can identify with everyone, and it's a lot easier to see yourself as an extension of the group, or just the group as part of your identity, because they're all there. They're all within arm's reach. You can keep eye contact with all of them. In a table setting, you would be able to, and you'd be able to maintain conversation with everyone. And so you're able to maintain the dynamic and sacrifice a little bit of your own personal identity for a group identity, but also incorporate the group identity into yourself and take credit for everything that the group does.
Yep. I think 4's a great number, and I look forward to it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not as though World of Warcraft didn't have its real benefits too, with having massive groups, and it really did have a stronger community feel than any other game I played. But like I say, what I like in one game, I don't like in another game.
Right.
Yeah. There still needs to be a clear separation between, well, this is Diablo, this is what Diablo's like. This is World of Warcraft, this is what World of Warcraft's like. They are separate things.
Plus, people bring up that argument, I have like more than 3 friends that I want to play with at any given time. I mean, how often is that going to come up? People have different schedules, people have different times of when they can play, and so after, I don't know, say the first week or something of people playing sporadically at different times when other people in your group of friends can't play, you have people at different levels, and suddenly they're like, no, I don't want to go back to where you guys are and replay that, I just want to keep going forward, and then you're back to a group of 2 or 3 friends that you play with who are all around the same level.
Now, just to comment on that, the things that I want in one game I don't want in another necessarily. The 3 games I'm playing right now are Diablo 2, Mortal Kombat 9, and Portal 2. And I don't necessarily want all 3 of these games merged into one giant ultimate game. I love all of them. I'm having a blast with all 3 of them, but they're all their own very nice, very tightly focused games that give, that say, okay, we're going to have this as our core experience, and we're really going to focus on it and perfect it and try and purify it down to the best thing that we can make. I don't want a fighting game to suddenly pop up in the middle of a round of Portal.
Finish him!
Exactly.
How crazy would Portal 2 be if it was 3 people? That suddenly you have to figure out a more complex puzzle around 3 people instead of just 2.
I think it would crack most people. I'm working my way through the multiplayer campaign with a friend, and they still have to keep things fairly simple.
Yeah. Just
because the number of variables, once you have, like, that would be, because it's almost exponential in terms of what each additional person adds in terms of mobility, because they're each bringing 2 portals.
Yep. Things get more complex very quickly.
So, and like even in Portal 2, like the final cup, they never have a moment in the game where they say, okay, every single mechanic that we've introduced in the game, here it is, all in one puzzle, because it would be almost impossible to design it, and it would take hours to solve. They never have much more. I think there's about 12 mechanics total that you could narrow down, and I don't think they have much more than 6 or 7 in the hardest puzzles.
Jeez.
And it's still pretty mind-blowing. Like, you sit there and you spend about 20 minutes just staring at the room going, okay, what do I do? How do these pieces fit together? But now it's a puzzle game, and so that's kind of the point of it. Act 3, sitting there looking at the jungle going, okay, where do I go? Is not a desired experience. Oh, and I remembered one of the other things that I wanted to say that contributes to the whole Act 3 hate. What is the last thing you did before you got to Act 3?
The last thing I did before I got to Act 3?
Sold all my stuff to the chick paladin and repaired. It's not a trick question.
All right, the last
took a ship with Mashif.
That's the last sort of big game.
Killed Duriel and talked
what
to
did
Tyrael.
Mashif do to me on that boat? What are you trying to say?
You you probably spent an hour dying to Jerry
Yeah.
before you finally managed to